La la la. Test, test. Can you hear?
Roberta. Okay. Yes, right. I want to make sure. Opladen? Am I saying that right?
Yes, Opladen.
Opladen and
Yeah.
Marienschule.
Marian.
Marienschule. All right, and then she's in Limburg too. And there was something else I was going to ask somebody who speaks. The postulator. Doggone it! I was going to look up postulator as a formal thing. Where's Kate? There was. I thought there was one other word. I was like, Marian.
Shula.
Marian Shula. Okay. All right, that's good.
All right.
Thank you.
If you need me, let me know.
Appreciate it. Michelle, they all have cars. Okay. Thank you, dear. We got a crowd coming in, so I'm going to just wait for them real quickly.
had all prepared, but at the end I forgot because I met.
And good afternoon, everyone. It appears you're already doing the very thing I was going to ask you to do, which was to meet somebody around you and introduce yourself, etc. We've got some guests, some visitors here. We're pleased for that all of you are joining us today. And we are live streaming and closed circuit. So there's sisters at the home, and there's just a whole variety of people who will be coming in live stream. The camera is there and here. So let's wave at the camera. So we're all here, and we're here to learn about the life and the process for Sister Aloysia Lowenfels. So we are just delighted that this is one of our 150th celebration activities. About 2.5 years ago, we had the sisters all here, and we asked them in groups. They worked a list of about this long of things they would like to do during the 150th. And so because of that, a small committee got together and said, we're going to do something about once a month, one celebration, just about every month. And then the canonization came on, and it became part of our 150th celebration. So we are really, really delighted. It's an unbelievable strong memory, a year. Just a great year. Let's just say that. So I want to speak to you and tell you a little bit about our speaker today. Her name is Sister Christiane Humpert. She is a poor handmaid of Jesus Christ. So let me give you a little bit of her story. It's here, but I realized I'm not going to read it to you. You have the advantage of the material in front of you, but those who are joining us by live stream or closed circuit don't necessarily have it. So I'm going to give a little bit of that bio. Elisabeth Maria Sophia was born in Cologne in Germany on September 13th, 1936. And I'm going to give the abbreviated version. In high school, etc., she began her studies in French, Latin, and history at the University of Cologne. And she spent her summers in France. So early on, she learned that travel really broadened her world and her experience. So that is a part of something of Sister Christiane that is a part of her character. She loves that travel. And then in 1959, she joined the Poor Handmaids. And she continued her studies at Goethe University in Frankfurt, Maine, Frankfurt, Maine, in French, Latin, and political science. So then she became, as a professional, then she became a professor, a teacher, at Marienschule in Limburg, and then she also did Opladen as well. And these are secondary schools for girls, and so she taught there. However, between the years of 2001 and 2013, she served in general leadership, located in Germany, and she was on this leadership team. And during that time, she studied intensively about Sister Aloysia. And she learned about her life, fascinated with her life, and began to dedicate her life to that. And then in 2013, that would be about 5 years ago, the general leadership agreed to begin the process of moving the name Sister Aloysia toward beatification. So Sister, at that point, became the postulator. Now, we have Sister Kate, who's our canon lawyer. She's here, and she clarified that this is the person. What does the postulator do? This is the person who does the historical background, the factual historical background, in the name of the church for the person who's being put forth for beatification. So Sister Sister Christiane has done that research, where she lived, how she lived her life, what she did, when did she go. We'll hear some of that. But so Sister is the postulator for this process of beatification. A step, the first step that's required to get moved toward canonization. But beatification is blessed. It's the first step. So after that introduction, I now want to invite Sister Christiane up here, and so that she can begin to educate us about Sister Aloysia Lowenfels. Sister Christiane.
Thank you, Sister Michelle. Thank you, Sister Michelle, for your welcoming words. And I must say, I must say that I am very happy to be here today and to have the chance to speak to you about Sister Aloysia. Sorry, I will say it, I'm so much used to it. In German, we would say Aloysia. At Aloysia, it's possible too, but I think you will understand also when I'm saying Aloysia Lowenfels. But very first of all, I would like to say you a hearty welcome. You who have followed the invitation of our American sisters to learn about the life, the spirituality, and the beatification process of Sister Aloysia Lowenfels. I have to add still another little correction. I had the chance to meet here one of the nephews of Sister Aloysia, and he wrote his name L-O-W. In German, we have this O with umlaut, or O-E, but he writes only L-O, so it would be Lowenfels, but I'd use the name Lowenfels with the umlaut, but I think it's not too complicated. Like us, Louise, this is her first name. She was a daughter of Catherine Casper, the foundress of our congregation, a poor handmaid of Jesus Christ, with one essential difference. Sister Aloysia was of Jewish heritage and perished as a young woman of 27 years in the gas chambers of Auschwitz. It is a great honor for me to speak to you today about her short life, which was formed by different factors. These circumstances tell a great deal about the historical and social events in Germany and in the Western world during the first part of the 20th century. Before I start, I would like to speak about the pictures we have chosen. I must say a great thank you to put all this together. It was difficult to find pictures about the personal life of Louise. I think when you have heard about the situation in Germany during these years, you can understand why it's difficult. They are more or less no more existing. And then there are a lot of photos taken by one of the historians who is still active and engaged in the beatification process. So you see modern houses, sometimes with still old kind, but not old houses really. And others have been taken from documents. So this is a little bit what we have as pictures. There are some topics where there are no pictures, others where there are more pictures. So I would like to start now. Louise, as she was called by her parents, was born on the 5th of July, 1915, the year after the beginning of the First World War, which is often called the Great War because of its duration, the great number of countries involved in it, the extreme high number of victims, more than 17 million persons died during this war, and the cruelty made possible by technical development of weapons. This war and the consequences of 1919 and the consequences of the 1919 concluded Contract of Versailles had for Germany a marked effect until the end of the Second World War. As the Treaty of Versailles had been signed as the official document which ended the war between Germany and the Allied forces on June 28, 1919, without the participation of Germany, which nevertheless had no other choice than to approve the treaty. It contained many extensive instructions to the reduction of the German borders, decisions about reparation, and to the military disarmament. Please have a look on the picture. You see Germany, you see Poland, you see Czechoslovakia, Austria, Hungary, and then the other countries on the left side, Switzerland, then the green is France, then the little yellow part is Luxembourg, Belgium, and the Netherlands, and then the more northern countries. When I said that there had been a reduction of the German borders, you have to look mainly to the eastern and southern part. What's marked here, Czechoslovakia, had been, and Hungary, had been until the war part of the Austrian Hungarian Empire, and this formed with Germany a certain unit. So, for instance, when you look at Czechoslovakia, you see there in the middle Prague, the capital of Czechoslovakia. Until the war, the Second World War, our sisters lived there also. So it was, but because there had been a big part of all this, habited by German, of people of German origin. Then a big part of Poland, in the western part of Poland, belonged to Germany. When you look down to France, there are also several parts of France which belonged before to Germany. So there you can realize that there had been many changings in the situation. But at the same time, I would like to ask you to look at this red word, Bamberg, just on there. This is a little bit to the left side, there is a red point. This is the place where Aloysia had been born and grown up in the first years of her life. And later on, when you go down, Nuremberg, I don't see if you're there, and then you find a little bit further down, the Danube, this big river, Danube, which goes from Germany to the eastern parts of Europe. And then afterwards, the family lived on the border of the Danube. So you have at least a certain idea of the geographical situation. Thank you. As the Treaty of Versailles had been considered unjust by the largest part of the German people, it formed the cornerstone for many further external and internal conflicts. 4 years earlier, in 1937, on January 30th, the Nazi regime terminated the treaty. And what's more important, 4 years earlier, in January 1933, Hitler had become Chancellor of Germany. From this day on, we can speak about the Nazi regime in Germany, which transformed the country and a large part of its population and brought the bloody Second World War. which started on the 1st of September 1939 and ended on May 8th, 1945. It left Germany and many of the surrounding countries in an unimaginable situation. This is in a certain way a very short look on the history behind all the story of Aloysia Lowenfels. Now we will look at her life. Louise Lowenfels' life shines a light upon the lives of many Jewish people in the time of the Nazi regime. She came from an Orthodox Jewish family of rural origin. Her ancestors had been living for more than 100 years, or perhaps even longer, in the area of northern Bavaria in Germany, near the town of Bamberg. She was born in a little village, Trabelsdorf, not far away from Bamberg, on July 5th, 1915, at the end of the first year of the Great War. Her mother also came from this little town, which was mainly Protestant. It's perhaps interesting to see that in Germany we had, no more today, but until the 50s, 60s, it was like that, villages, towns, which were mainly Protestant or Catholic. And this depended very often from the situation in the beginning of the 19th century, when there were some noble families possessing ground, and so they gave ground to people who would be interested to do farming. And so when the noble families were Protestant, most of the people there engaged were Protestant too. And when these were Catholic families, or if these were even possessions of the church, Catholic Church, then the people were very often Catholics, and so it remained. And sometimes this goes even back to the time of the Reformation in the 16th century, where this started, and so on. We can say it was, Strabelsdorf was a little village where there lived Protestant families and Jewish families, and just 2 Catholic families. All the rest was, but the neighbor village, we will see some pictures afterwards also, it was Catholic. So it's really interesting, and in a certain way it continues until today. Her father came from the area around Bad Windsheim. This is about 40 miles away from Trabelsdorf. He was a successful, and because of his honesty, a highly regarded butcher and trader in livestock. Since 2 of her siblings had died very young, Louise grew up the youngest of 10 children. Now you see some of the pictures of this village. You see it's a small village. You have different houses. These are houses from today, but several of them are renovated, older houses. And then you see this big white house, right? It looks larger than the other houses, and this has been the former synagogue of the village. It shows that there had been an important Jewish community because they had their own synagogue. And this is the other side of the synagogue, the front view. We will speak about it later on, but you know certainly that in 1938 there was this terrible crystal night, a night it was a night of the 9th November 1938, where the Nazi started to destroy mainly the synagogues of the Jewish people. They burnt them in most of the towns, villages, everywhere. But here you see the inside view of the synagogue, they did not dare to put fire because the synagogue, as you have seen before, was so near to other houses. So they only damaged it. And the ruin was standing there. It belonged to the village or to the community, administrative community there, until the years 50 after the war. Then it was sold for a small price to someone who would be interested in this leftovers. And there was a lady, I met her some years ago, and as a very old lady, and she told it that she thought, oh, I could buy it, it's not expensive, and then I will have a house which I can form for my family. And so this is now, the pictures you saw are the former synagogue habited by a family now. After the end of the First World War, the family left Trabelsdorf and moved to Buxheim, a little town close to Ingolstadt, where some relatives of Louise's mother lived. Here you see this house at Buxheim, where the family rented the first floor. No, you say, sorry, we say in Germany the first floor, you are saying here the second floor. And this house is now how it is actually. But it had not changed, only his how to say, the decoration, but it remains the same house. And the family lived there. With the children, some of the older children did not follow them, but most of the children followed them. We do not really know the reason for that move. One reason may have been the wish of the mother to be closer to relatives. Another could have been that after the Treaty of Versailles, which brought an end to World War I, and the downfall of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, remember the map you have seen, the chances for livestock trade in this area of northern Bavaria were no more the same as they had been before the war. So the father must have said, I have no chance here. I cannot go to the eastern areas because there were the borders, so I have to do something else. The little town of Buxheim, about 10 miles away from Ingolstadt, was almost totally Catholic. The Lowenfels family were the only Jewish citizens in it. So you have seen the house where they lived. Just in front of the house is this big Catholic church. And in this church, there is a typically Bavarian picture of our statue of Our Lady. And the decoration, this is really very typical for this area. And then, as it was a Catholic place, you can find in this town, in many streets, crosses, statues of saints, of Our Lady. This was typical for this area. But this shows also that Louise here was surrounded really by a very special life. She got very many impressions how this could be to live with Catholic people. And she had also to go to school, and there she gained also some contact with Catholic life. This is a school behind the church. Today it's an old building. It looked nicer and better at the time when Louise went to school. But at least for her mother and her older siblings, this was a great problem. She had many friends. She saw so much about Catholic life, and the mother was also sure that she tried to enter the church, which was not allowed, but what will you do? So What I have to say here is that in 1923, about 2 years when they had changed the town, the village to live, her father died exactly the day after Louise's 8th birthday. And Louise loved her father very much, and her father loved his youngest daughter. So it was a very hard experience for Louise. And here is the tombstone of his father in the Jewish cemetery of Ingolstadt. You see here, written in Hebraic language, a text, and here it has been translated into German. I will read you the text because I think it's also interesting for the influence the Jewish life must have had on Louise. Here is buried a man straight, upright, and righteous, fearing God in all his days. It is Solomon, son of Issachar. He died on Friday and has been buried on Monday. His life shall be included in the number of those having eternal life. Here you can read Herr Salomon Lowenfels, Mr. Salomon Lowenfels, born in 18th February 1870 and gestorben, died on the 6th of July 1923. So, 3 years later, in 1926, Louise's mother moved to Ingolstadt with the younger children. This is one of the houses in which the family found an apartment. She sent Louise to a secondary school for girls, which was run by Catholic sisters. I must add here, in many towns, secondary schools for girls were run by sisters. And the town, the municipality had said, yes, the sisters will run the school, but they must be ready also to take over not only Catholic, but also Protestant and Jewish children. So most of the students were Catholic or Protestant, but there were also a few girls of Jewish faith. These girls did not have to fear any discrimination or problems in the school. The school reports show how much the teachers appreciated Louise's eagerness to learn. However, they also show that Louise had a certain tendency to the Catholic faith when she became a teenager, and that she felt sometimes lost in a certain way. The Jewish students had religious instruction in the Jewish faith. If I remember my own experiences with Jewish students around Limburg, it was either the rabbi or the cantor of the Jewish congregation who taught those classes, most of the time outside the normal schedule of the school. On Easter 1932, Louise graduated with good results, but she added another year of training in a commercial course which was offered by the school, but she did not finish it. She followed up 2 trimesters, but not the 3rd trimester. I think we have no information about it, but I think this shows that her mother had wished that she should participate in this course, and that it has not been her own wish. So, because you see a picture in the last row on the left side. On Easter 1933, she moved to the training school for kindergarten teacher in Nördlingen. This town, which is about 50 miles away from Ingolstadt, together with another Jewish student. Young Jewish women really had no other chance for secondary education as to go to sisters. Either a Catholic or Protestant, because there were also Protestant schools, Protestant sisters, unless they lived in a large city. This change of school from Ingolstadt to Nördlingen happened just at a time when the National Socialist government decided upon the first political restrictive laws. On March 23, 1933, the so-called Enabling Act was passed. This was a constitution amendment that in effect gave Chancellor Adolf Hitler the power to enact laws without the involvement of the legislature, and transformed Hitler's government into a legal dictatorship. On April 1st, the boycott of all Jewish shops and the first laws to exclude Jews from certain professions began. Still, the Catholic schools run by religious could go on, at least until 1938 or 39. Then all the Catholic and Protestant schools were closed. That they could run further in this year 33, this was due to the fact that most of the teachers there were religious. But all students and teachers had to appear already in 1933 for the public National Socialist events and celebration. For example, for the feast of what we called in Germany Sonnenwendfeier, originally a midsummer festival celebrating the summer solstice. And it was turned into a political platform for the Nazis. It was celebrated on June 24th. For some of the Jewish students, these were hard things to do. We heard that it was also difficult for Louise to assist to this ceremony. In Nördlingen too, she received religious instruction together with other Jewish students, most likely by the cantor of the Jewish synagogue. Be it here through a report given by a fellow student to her own mother that Louise also went for instruction to a Catholic priest in this town. Obviously, her wish to become Catholic grew stronger in her. This picture shows the final year, the final exam in Nördlingen. Julie Dowd has made this helpful little sign, who she is, or who is Louise. In 1935, after the end of her professional training, she informed her mother and her siblings, still living in Germany, of her wish to convert to the Catholic faith. That brought about a separation from her family. Her mother, her siblings, all those who were together, prayed the prayer Shiva about her, the prayer for the dead. This was a time when life for Jews became more and more difficult in Germany, and that also meant it was hard for a Jew to find a job. In September 1935, the so-called Nuremberg race laws were passed. The Nuremberg laws, as they became known, defined someone as a Jew who had 3 or 4 Jewish grandparents, regardless of whether that individual identified himself or herself as a Jew or belonged to the Jewish religious community. If Jewish, they were not considered as citizens of the Third Reich. Obviously, therefore, Louisa had her first professional experience and work in a Jewish family in Recklinghausen, a town situated more to the north, outside of Bavaria, in the north of Düsseldorf, and professional experience and work in a Jewish family in Recklinghausen, and later in a Jewish children's home in Frankfurt. In both places, it was clear that life was increasingly difficult for people who were not members of the National Socialist Party. One of the young children of the family in which she worked in Recklinghausen was enrolled in a Catholic kindergarten not far from the family home. The sisters running the kindergarten had accepted this Jewish boy, but they were threatened that they would lose the property of the convent if they did not dismiss the Jewish child. Louise's relationship to those sisters and the people in the parish also led to her own dismissal from that family because they feared the high interest of Louise for the Catholic faith. In Frankfurt, the pressure upon Jews had become so much that Louise left the city after a short stay. She could, however, get some contact with our PHJC sisters there. They had a convent not far away from the children's home. With the sisters' help, she found board, lodging, and work in one of the large institutions of the PHJCs in Mönchengladbach, a bigger town, not far away from Düsseldorf. This institution consisted of a hospital, a children's home, kindergarten, and boarding school for the girls studying domestic work. Louise found work in both the kindergarten and the boarding school. Here it was that she took the decision to be baptized. This was on November 25th, 1935. She was baptized in the chapel of the sisters by a Franciscan priest who also was the official confessor of the sisters. It is interesting that we cannot find any notice about the baptism in the convent chronicle of the sisters. That is just one of the examples that the church institutions and the houses of religious avoided mentioning contact with Jews in writing at that time. We can see that omission in all religious institutions, whatever the congregation or order, as far as we can tell today. Only after the war, Louise's godmother mentioned Louise's deep faith. They became friends when Louise came to Mönchengladbach. Also after the war, the generate of the PHJC got 2 letters from the former chaplain in Frankfurt who got to know Louise. He too underlined her deep will to become baptized and to follow God's will. We can see from that testimony that Louise did not decide to become a Catholic in order to avoid being in danger. As we shall see, that was not even possible. Most likely, it was already clear in 1936. One day, one of the boarders told her fellow students in Louise's presence that a Jew had been smuggled into the boarding house, and if that Jew would not disappear immediately, she herself would leave the institute. She also assumed that all the other students would also leave the school in protest. So Louise could no longer stay in Mönchengladbach, both for her own safety, but mainly for the safety of all the others living there in the house and the surroundings. Since the German PHJCs had long before made contact with their Dutch fellow sisters, and Mönchengladbach is close to the German-Dutch border, Louise could leave the town very fast. On March 3rd, 1936, her move to the Netherlands is mentioned in the city registry of Geleen. She lived there in a large boarding school which the sisters had established at the time of the German cultural struggle in the years 1888. Sorry, not 88, but 80 only. If not, it would be wrong. 1880. Louise learned the Dutch language very fast. She got used to the different way of running a kindergarten and also the primary education in the Netherlands and in Germany. And since the school of our Dutch sisters also offered commercial training, she participated in a course that offered typing and Dutch shorthand. And I must add, the final reports she got are really excellent. In September 1937, she asked to be admitted as a postulant to the PHJC congregation. 1 year later, she received the habit in September 1938, and together with 2 Dutch postulants, she started her novitiate. She received the name Sister Aloysia, Sister Aloysia, as her name in religious life. Only a very short time later, on November 9th, 1938, I mentioned it already, Germany experienced the terror of the so-called pogrom night, or the crystal night. Crystal night because all the lamps hanging in the synagogues and the menorah, all was destroyed. And this was very often made of crystal. Yes, crystals. That meant that all over the Third Reich, the shops of the Jews, their homes and their synagogues burnt and were destroyed. That led to the decision of Louise's mother and her remaining siblings, who were still in Germany, not all, some had left Germany much earlier, to start preparations for immigration to the United States. I should add a little word. They had to pay a high sum to get the permission. And second point, they had to prove that there were people in the United States who would take over the responsibility for them when they would reach the country. If this would not be, then they could not have left Germany. So many Jewish people could not leave Germany because of one of these explanations, or they had no members, family members or friends in the United States, or they did not have the money to pay to leave Germany. It is said that one of Louise's brothers visited her asking her to come with them. She is said to have rejected that offer since she was sure that meant she would not be able to continue religious life, and she had made that decision to be a sister for life. So she remained. At that time, she could not possibly foresee what was to happen on May 10th, 1940, a few months before she was to take first vows. I may perhaps give a short explanation to this picture. This is a picture where she took her first vows. On the left side, she is sitting in the middle of these three sisters, Louise in the middle, two Dutch sisters on the left and right side, and on the other side, these sisters clothed in white clothing. These are the postulants becoming novices. So they get, and near the altar you can see the Bishop of Vermont. Yeah. So, but about a few months before, the National Socialists declared war, had declared war on September 1st, 1939, and after that, things happened very fast. Germany invaded Poland, France and England declared war on Germany. There were already important military fights in the east. Then Denmark was invaded as well as Norway. And then on May 10th, 1940, Germany attacked and occupied the Western countries, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. This was it was in May, and in September, she had to make her first vows, Louise. 3 days later, a commissary of the Third Reich took over the government in the Netherlands. That proved a very bad awakening for all, especially for the Jews who had fled to the Netherlands, remembering the First World War when the Dutch people had remained neutral. Many Jews had come to the Netherlands after 1933, and then especially after 1938. Already in July 1940, Jewish shops in Geleen were marked in a special way to show that they were owned by a Jew. By the end of July, many of those store funds were smashed, and in November, the Jews were forbidden to hold any jobs in public institutions. That also meant that Sister Aloysia was no longer allowed to work in the kindergarten or in the school. In January of 1941, the local and county registers had to list all Jews living there. From September 1941 on, Jewish children were no longer allowed to attend public schools. So you see that the changings in the Netherlands, which seemed to be a safe country, went on very fast. From the beginning of May 1942, all Jews, including Sister Aloysia, had to wear the yellow star on their clothing, indicating that they were Jewish. At the end of January 1942, the so-called one-day conference was held in Berlin. In that conference, it was decided that all Jews in Germany and also in the occupied territories had to be killed. It was said that they were to be deported to the east for forced labor. That meant concentration camps, and the final goal was to kill them all. The beginning of such deportations caused strong protests in the Netherlands. The Christian churches, including the Catholic Church, sent an official letter to the Commissary of the Reich, trying to keep the Jews from those forced labor camps in Germany, and they especially tried to protect those Jews who had converted to Christianity. They also wrote a statement that was to be read from all pulpits. After a member of the Commissariat of the Reich intervened, the Dutch Reformed Church withdrew the statement. But from July 15, 1942, 3 times every week, the deportations left Camp Westerbork in the north of the Netherlands for the east. Camp Westerbork was utilized as a staging ground for the deportation of Jews to the death camps. So the Catholic Church and the other Protestant churches decided to read the protest statement on Sunday, July 26, 1942, from in the churches during Mass or their religious services. In answer to that, the deportation of all Catholic Jews was decided by the Commissary of the Reich. It was mainly against the Catholic Church because I think that their protests were very strong. In 1 week later, on August 2nd, 1942, many of those Catholic Jews, especially the religious who were converted Jews, were taken prisoner. Early Sunday morning, 2 officials of the Secret Service, you know perhaps the name Gestapo, rang the convent bell in the company of a Dutch policeman who had been forced to join them. The sisters were in chapel. It was shortly before early Mass. Sister Aloysia was allowed to gather some things to take along, and she also was allowed to receive Holy Communion in chapel. Then she had to get into the police car. She was one of the first who were arrested on that day, being taken to labor camp Amersfoort, and from there she was taken to Camp Westerbork in the night between August 3rd and 4th. After her, many other religious people were arrested. The cars went around. In Camp Westerbork, she was together with a larger group of religious men and women, among them Edith Stein and her own sister, Edith Stein's sister. I say men and women, this is correct, but they were not together in the same rooms. Only women were together and men were together. So they had the chance to meet the priests who had been arrested when they came out and could make or should make a little walk. This was all. On the morning of August 7th, the transport with 787 Jews, among them more than 100 Jews who had become Catholics, left Westerbork for Auschwitz. In the night of August 8th to 9th, the train with the prisoners reached Auschwitz. 523 prisoners, among them the religious men and women, were sent directly to the gas chambers. That means it was said that there are rooms where they can get a shower. And those who were considered to be able to do working, they were sent to the camp and enregistered in the camp of Auschwitz. All others are not enregistered in Auschwitz. We know about them only by the enregistrement in Westerbork. This was very detailed, but in Auschwitz, nothing. Here you can see, I think, pictures you probably know already about Auschwitz. And you should see this gate. Work makes you free. It's not understandable, this. We bow down in high respect and veneration before this young woman and all those who were made victims of an ideology without respect for human beings. But it's perhaps a sign of hope. Today, there are signs of respect and honor for Sister Aloysia. In the city of Geleen, our sisters put there, it's a place where the church of the convent had stood, as a remembering stone for her. In Dernbach, in Germany, this was put up in 2006. In 2007, a house in front of the mother house in Dernbach, a former orphanage and now a house for retreat, for conferences, for meetings, was looking for a name. And then the the provincial superior of Dernbach at that time, Sister Salesiana, said, oh, it would be good to give to the house the name of Sister Aloysia. Now it's Sister Aloysia's, no, Aloysia Lowenfels house, but sister, it would have become too long. Aloysia Lowenfels house. And then, I don't know if you have heard of a ceremony and an activity which started in the 19th of 1990 and a little bit later. There was an artist who started to put down what he named stumble stones in the street, not in the street itself, but on the walking sides, to remember, that was the first part, to remember what we called afterwards Zigans, Roma people, Sinti people, who were also killed in the concentration camps. And then he said, oh, what's more important are all the Jews. And he started to form these stones for the Jews who were known and where the towns, families, other institutions were asking for these stones. And in the neighbor village of Trabelsdorf, where Aloysia was born, there is a pastoral assistant who is very eager to bring forward the memory of Aloysia Lowenfels. And she, together with the administration of the town, Trabelsdorf and the other villages bound together, they started this. And in November 1900, sorry, 2016, these stones were laid. You see here is an artist who does it. Then there is a whole ceremony with a talk and music normally and some songs. And then there is still, this is here the stone. Here born, Louise Lowenfels, Sister Aloysia, born, Jahrgang, age of her birth, 1915, Congregation for Handmaids of Jesus Christ, flight to the Netherlands, killed on the 9th of August 1942, Auschwitz. So, and with this, I have ended with a short, a little bit too late, sorry.
Thank you, Sister Aloysia. Thank you, Christiane. I think we will take a 15-minute break, so 15 minutes on your watch, and then Sister will come back and give the second 2 pieces of her talk, and we'll have some time for questions at the end. Okay? There are some refreshments in the back. So if Can we please come back to our seats?
Really, it was not, also for understanding it was not so difficult. For understanding it was not too difficult, my English, no? And it's okay because now there are two parts. No questions now.
You want to do some questions now? Why don't we wait till later?
Later.
Yeah.
Then it's okay. Okay. This second part of the talk today will have less history. It concerns the spirituality of Sister Aloysia, or of Louise, both. When we look at Sister Aloysia's life, on the one hand, we recognize in her the fate of the German youth in the time of the National Socialists. And on the other hand, she is an example for the fact that both Jews and Christians are deeply united in their faith in one God. Louise, Sister Aloysia, is one of the long line of faithful about whom the Torah speaks. They followed the way which God called them to the very end. We can also look at the Old Testament picture of the vine and the branches. which was also brought into the Gospel of John, when he speaks about the relationship between the disciples and the risen Lord. They became a model for the faithful of all times, including Catherine Casper, the founders of our congregation, and also for Sister Aloysia. She belonged to those religious women who, like Edith Stein, came from the Jewish faith and lived their life with total commitment in the imitation of Christ, even giving up their lives in the gas chambers of the concentration camp in Auschwitz. Their martyrdom is a witness for their faith and for the love that has its origin in Christ. In the dogmatic constitution of the Second Vatican Council, Lumen Gentium, which speaks about the Church, we can read the following sentences about the witness by martyrdom. It was a call for some Christians in the earliest time already to give his highest witness for love, and it will be the same always. The Church sees martyrdom, which makes the disciple resemble the Lord in the free acceptance of death for the salvation of the world. It sees it as a special gift and the highest proof for love. Although it will be given to few, all must be ready to witness for Christ in front of people and to follow him on the way of the cross in the persecutions that will always be there for the Church. The end. When we look at Louise's rather short life, we see that from her early youth on, she was influenced by the Christian surroundings in which she lived and tried to find the way God wanted her to go, without neglecting the Jewish faith in which she grew up in her family. A good example for this attitude seems to me to be what is told about her time in the kindergarten seminary in Nördlingen. With other Jewish students, she accepted the invitation of the teacher and cantor of the Jewish community to come to his home on the Sabbath. But then again, she went on Sunday to the Catholic parish priest in Nördlingen, according to a Jewish classmate who told this to her mother. After having finished her vocational training as a kindergarten teacher in Nördlingen, she told her family she wanted to become Catholic. She was looked upon as an apostate in her own family. After having left her home, twice she found employment with Jewish people in Recklinghausen and in Frankfurt. But at the same time, she looked for contacts with Christians. Here is one of the two letters written after the war by Father Koik, the chaplain of the parish in Frankfurt, with whom she had come into contact. When he heard that Louise died in Auschwitz, he wrote, I got to know Louise Lowenfels when I was chaplain in St. Boniface in Frankfurt South Side. I will never forget this meeting. Her personality impressed me deeply. With an admirable quietness of soul, she talked to me about her inner and outer life for about 2 hours. Here I sat opposite a person of whom I felt that God, that the fullness of divine grace had been poured out over this noble Jewish girl with all wisdom and insight. Without the least trace of bitterness, she shared with me her life of suffering. She talked about what she had already lost and what she knew was still to be taken from her. In saying that, she opened her small bag and allowed me to see some little things that she still could call her own. There was a precious rosary from Jerusalem, which the abbess of Eichstätt, the Benedictine abbey, had given her. She also allowed me to see letters which one of her brothers had written to her, imploring her in a most moving way not to leave the Jewish law, not to be unfaithful. Louise knew that she had to bring deep pain to her mother and to her brothers, but she was firmly resolved to become a Catholic. I will be a Catholic, she told me in all humility and quiet resolution, even if I have to leave Germany because of my faith, if I have to go to England or to America. After this, our first meeting, she often came to the conferences I gave on Cardinal Newman and his religious view. When she met me in the street with the Jewish children for whom she cared like a mother, the way in which she combined gain and loss, joy and pain, became obvious in a most wonderful way. Louise's decision to become Catholic became reality in Mönchengladbach, as you heard already, where she received the baptism. But her way remained difficult and dangerous and brought her to the Netherlands. More than 1 year after her flight, she asked the poor handmaids whom she lived with for acceptance in the congregation. Before her admission to the novitiate, she wrote to Father Koik. On Thursday, our retreat started, and on September 17th, God willing, I will receive the religious habit. I am looking forward to it with joy. I ask for your prayers so that I can become a sister according to God's holy will. Before the reception, there is another great grace awaiting me. His Excellency, Monsignor Lemons, Bishop of Vermont, will grant me the sacrament of confirmation. Me on the way of my life. Jesus loves his bride. Father, how much I would enjoy if you could come, if you could be here on my day of grace. You will surely understand that nobody of my family will be here, but I will gladly accept this sacrifice for the salvation of their souls. This letter shows clearly the path she decided to follow. She wants to become a sister according to God's holy will and to accept his blessings of grace, but also the sacrifices for the salvation of the souls of her family. After the war, sisters reported that they had often seen Sister Aloysia in the chapel, praying for her people and her family members, as she herself had said. That was when the difficulties for the Jews were growing from day to day. She knew that she also faced a sad end, but she accepted that as God's will for herself. On the day of her first vows, she had given a text to one of her fellow sisters, a text she had written herself. In that text, we read the following lines, among others. Victim souls, purified in the fire of love, led on thorny pathways with wounded feet and body, the soul in pain and full of storms, in order to finally get up again, out of all the trouble and difficulty, and to belong to God in holy love, free from human beings, alone with God. In a book published in 1967 in the Netherlands by Carmelite priests and friends of Sister Edith Stein, who was a companion of Sister Aloysia in Westerbork and Auschwitz, we read the following short biography of Sister Aloysia. She was looked upon as an apostate in her own family home. The abbess of St. Walburgis in Eichstätt had not accepted her because of her fear of the laws against the Jews. And when she came to Frankfurt, she had to leave her home area in southern Germany forever. Again, in absolute poverty and peace of soul, she also left Frankfurt when the situation became more and more critical for Jews. Her whole way of life was truly a via mirabilis, a wonderful way. Her conversion and acceptance in the church, her acceptance in the PHJC congregation, her taking of vows, her serving love to all brothers and sisters in the Lord, and then the deportation by the German political police, and finally her victim death in Auschwitz. I believe that Sister Aloysia still had the same frame of mind at the point of her death that she had had when I got to know her. I believe that Sister Aloysia offered her young and hopeful life as a sacrifice in the strength of her holy faith and of her confirmation, which filled her with sacrificial joy, so that she went to eternity as a glorious martyr. This is the text in this first biography which had been written about her. Sister Aloysia's spirituality corresponds to what the Church presumes to accept someone as being member of the Church in heaven. In the report of a workshop about Saints Without Borders, Ecumenical Reflections on the Great Cloud of Witnesses, given in 2013 by a professor of the Pontifical University of the Salesians in Rome, I found the following passage which seems to me enlightening about the topic of beatification or canonization. Dealing with the union of the Pilgrim Church with the Church in heaven, the Vatican Council has justified and promoted the generation of the has justified, I repeat the sentence, dealing with the union of the Pilgrim Church with the Church in heaven, the Vatican Council has justified and promoted the veneration of the saints. It put, the Church has always believed that the apostles and Christ's martyrs, who had given the supreme witness of faith and charity by the shedding of their blood, are closely joined with us in Christ, and she has always venerated them with special devotion, together with the Blessed Virgin Mary and the holy angels. Sorry, what happened there? The church had piously implored the aid of their intercession. To these were soon added also those who had more closely imitated Christ's virginity and poverty, and finally others whom the outstanding practice of the virtues and the divine charisms recommended to the pious devotion and imitation of the faithful. This devotion and imitation of the faithful can be taken over by young people, young girls today. We would like to show you here some pictures coming from a group of girl servers in the church in the neighbor village or town to Trabelsdorf in Priesendorf. I had spoken of the pastoral assistant in this village already when we spoke about the stumblestones, that she was so very active. And every year she went mainly with the girls' service for a trip during their vacation time. And this year they had chosen a trip on the footsteps of Louise Lowenfels. And it was very interesting. The Archdiocese of Bamberg is supporting these activities. And this last year, it was in 2017, it was the 10th time that those activities went on. And so they had decided to give a gift of about 5,000 euro to the group of young people who would find out the best way to spend their holidays, their vacations. And so they decided, the diocese found that this would be the best way to do it, so they got the money. With one condition, they had to prepare an exposition about their trip, about their way to, on the footsteps of Louise. So they came first to Dernbach to be informed, because Louise had been a poor handmaid of Jesus Christ. This was a group with 2 cars, larger cars, and so they came. They stayed at Dernbach. Then they went to Geleen in the Netherlands, where you have seen this memorial of Louise. And one of the Dutch sisters came there and explained to them and spoke to them. From there, they went to Amsterdam to be to follow a little bit the footsteps of Anne Frank. I think you know the name. I don't know if you say Anne Frank, but Anne Frank. And from there, they went to Westerbork in the north of the Netherlands, where they could find a very good documentation of what happened during the war. From there they returned, and then they started to prepare their, documentation, this exposition. And this should be made so that this could go from place to place. I don't know, it's very interesting. This was like a metal piece in the, you could put on the ground, and then you could take out of it like a roll with this, and it could be fixed behind. And so there are 5 of these rolls, and they are speaking of their experiences. So they are telling what they were doing, where they went. There you see also that she was born as a Jew in 1915 in Trabelsdorf. This is this little castle there. And there, this is a group there. And where she went, there is the chapel in Priesendorf, then there is Buxheim, Nördlingen, Ingolstadt, Frankfurt, Recklinghausen, Mönchengladbach, the different places where they took photos. And then they are speaking, this here on the right side, this is a modern picture of Aloysia made by one of the Benedictines in the convent of Eibingen in Germany and hanging in the Aloysia Lowenfels house. And there they are saying what is going on today. For instance, Louise accepted her destiny straight, with her head straight up. And then afterwards, no, thank you very much, really took out what they were saying about Louise, and we translated it also, she translated it. So I think, for me, it's a real wonderful example that the life of Louise and her destiny can be accepted by young people today. So you can see. Okay. Yes. I think we could go on. So, yes. This was now the second part. I thought that this would be a good end of the spiritual passage. When you are not too tired, and we could finish by this really third part, the beatification process. This is now a little bit more, how to say, not, I don't know if it's interesting for you, but it must be told because it's important. Opening of the beatification process, yes. In 2007, oh sorry, I do so, I pay a little bit attention. In 2007, that's okay? Under Pope Benedict XVI, the Congregation for the Causes of Saints published a new instruction concerning the beatification. It stated that the beatification process shall now be executed in the dioceses. For those who are already a little bit older, they will remember that the beatification of Catherine Casper took place in Rome 40 years ago. But now this will take place in the home dioceses. For Sister Aloysia, the responsibility of the process lies in the hands of the Bishop of Limburg in Germany. The reasons for this decision are the following. Normally, the process is run in the diocese in which the so-called servant of God died. For Sister Aloysia, as for all those who died in concentration camps, such as Auschwitz, this was and will not be possible. So we had to get in touch with the bishop of the Diocese of Roermond in the Netherlands, where she lived 6 years before being brought to Auschwitz. One of our Dutch sisters, who since many years was engaged in studies about Sister Aloysia's life, I think I can mention her name because many of the sisters will know her, Sister Arnolda. So Sister Arnolda and I spoke with the bishop. He would have been interested to take over the process, but he understood that for us, a German diocese would be better, mainly because of the language, but also because Sister Aloysia had been member of the congregation of the PHJC, who had been founded in the Diocese of Limburg. And we could tell him that the Limburg bishop was very interested to take over the process. This question of language is a very special question. In the Netherlands, people speak Dutch. So, if the process would have been run in the Netherlands, all the text would have been in Dutch. The Dutch sisters had no one who could take over all this work to be done, which had to be done. I could not start to learn Dutch. And so it was really easier to take language, as language German. But when all our documents will go to Rome, this must be in another language. Rome accepts only 6 languages: Latin, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, French. This was until some years ago. And now also English, but no other language. The first languages are all related to the Latin. So Latin was the first, the official language, and the others, this could follow, because there is a fear that those co-workers who are working in this congregation of the saints understand another language than Latin or Italian, perhaps French or Spanish. So we decided we will make the process in Germany in German language, but the translation going to Rome will be English. Because we said it would not make sense to take any other translation for at least 2 reasons. We have no sisters speaking Italian or speaking French. Some would perhaps know a little bit of French, but not to make a whole big paper about it. And on the other side, it would also have been a question of costs, because all this should have been translated by someone who is acknowledged as a correct translator. And for what? There will be no sisters afterwards who would be able to read the texts when they're in the generate or would be copied or whatsoever. So English is much better. And there we have also the possibility to find translators which are very good, but not so expensive. This is also a serious question. In the church document, Sanctorum Mater, Mother of the Saints, this instruction which had been edited under Pope Benedict XVI, this document gives instructions for conducting inquiries in the causes of saints. And there you can read, before deciding to initiate the cause, the diocesan bishop must verify if, among a significant portion of the people of God, the servant of God enjoys an authentic and widespread reputation of holiness or of martyrdom, as well as an authentic and widespread reputation of intercessory power. This reputation must be spontaneous and not artificially produced. It must be stable, continuous, widespread among trustworthy people and existing among a significant portion of the people of God. So, there we were looking around. Aloysia is well known in the Archdiocese of Bamberg. She is well known in the diocese of Eichstätt, where Buxheim and Ingolstadt are lying. She is known in the diocese of Augsburg, to which Nördlingen belongs. She is very well known in the town of Recklinghausen, which belongs to the town of which belongs to the diocese of Münster. And this is due to the fact that already in 1980-81, there was a group of young people, teachers mainly, in Recklinghausen who started to study the destiny of the Jews who had lived in their town. And there they discovered also the name of Louise, even if she remained there not completely 2 months. But there was a friend of, yes, a friend of her or someone who had got to know her very well. It was already an old lady at that time, but nevertheless she could speak of it. And then one of these teachers wrote to the former provincial in the Netherlands and said, could you please give us some information? And so it continued there. And you can read a lot about Louise in Recklinghausen, even if she didn't stay for a long time. Then Mönchengladbach too, and then the Netherlands, and then also Dernbach and surroundings, the Diocese of Limburg, and we must say also in America. I gave a talk 5 years ago, so you get to know about her too. The Indian sisters told me last time when there was a group of Indian sisters at Dernbach, sisters who had never come to Germany until now, and so at one evening I had to give a little talk about Louise. I did so. Then they told me, we know about her. You have not to give us this English translation of the prayer. We prayed every day. So I thought, oh, that's wonderful. And now, here again, so we can say, yes, she is not unknown. And when I looked into the internet, at least in Germany, there were so many times little reports about her, or she was mentioned in reports of Jewish life in this place or in that place. So you can say it's not bad. And there are also 2 publications which were rather well known. One came from Ingolstadt and the other from the surroundings of Bamberg, so it's really interesting. But there are still other aspects. Even if the bishop is responsible for the process, he must not be the actor. That means the petitioner of the cause. These can be also other juridical institutes, for instance, our congregation. As we consider Sister Aloysia's life and her martyrdom as an important testimony for the spirituality of our foundress and a good example for all our sisters, associates, and friends, we poor handmaids wanted to be the petitioners of the cause. So we had to assume the moral and financial obligations of the cause, but we could also choose some of the members of the commission running the inquiry. Now I have to add something. We were discussing this, and the Diocese of Limburg would have taken over also the process for the beatification of Louise, so as it took over the process of the canonization of Catherine Kesper. They were very eager that this would go forward. But we said, there are 2 reasons for the canonization. This was something which had to be finished. There was nothing really new. The miracle was on process. It was not yet finished, but at least it could go on. And we said also it's a question of money. There in the diocese said, oh, we would take it over. Then we said, okay. It's also important for the diocese because Catherine Casper will be the first saint of the Diocese of Limburg. And she is well known. Okay. But then we said, no. There was one reason: the documents about Louise were not yet gathered very well. So I thought, no, when this will go to someone else, no, that will not be serious, I will not say, but this would not be a wise way. And the generalate at that time, the general leadership, decided that we would bring this question to general chapter in 2013, to present it to the sisters and to ask them, the delegates who had come for our general chapter, what they are thinking about this. And then we voted about it, and except one voice, all said yes. And then I had been asked to become the postulator of this cause, of this process, to gather all the other things. It was easy. I had finished general leadership. To go to school or to do other things, I am too old, so I could follow up this. Okay. So the actor, this means us, the congregation, has to nominate a postulator and a replacement person. For us, I have been installed as postulator, and our Dutch sister Arnolda as vice postulator. My task is to bring together all the documents which are existing in our congregation or which could be found in different archives or so forth, wherever you can find something or hear about it. And there I could start and tell until this evening, there are so many interesting and surprising events that you can say, oh, it's really fascinating, this. The fact that two sisters were ready to take over the tasks of the postulator and the replacement person helped also to reduce the costs of the process. The Limburg diocesan offices, which can help us, are also ready to do it voluntarily. I speak of the costs because we are saying we have also obligation towards our missions. And we cannot say we have to follow up now beatification process and say we need money for this, and there are the missions, what is more important, so we have to see how will it go. As the bishop cannot conduct the process himself, because he has other things to do, he has to designate a member of the episcopal curia, normally an experienced canonist, as his representative. Then the so-called promoter of justice. I don't know if you ever heard this word. This is a person who has to be vigilant that everything prescribed by law is faithfully observed. I will make a little, yes, find it. In former times, this person was called the lawyer of the devil. Good. He had to show that nothing would be wrong. But now I think promoter of justice is a very good word and a correct word. These three, and then there is still a notary from the episcopal offices. The postulator can help, as these three, the promoter, the episcopal delegate, the promoter and the notary are the three officials of the inquiry. The postulator can help to find theologians who could be nominated as the theological censors and the historical expert in this inquiry. But before the bishop will organize all this, he has to ask the congregation for the causes of saints, whether there is on the part of the Holy See any obstacle to the cause. He is to send, together with his request, a short report in which he illustrates the biographical data of the servant of God, date, place, diocese of birth and of death, activity in the church, etc., and the importance of the cause for the church. These papers have been written by myself, but they would be sent through the bishop there. If Rome agrees with him, they will send the famous nihil obstat. I don't know if you ever had heard this word. Nothing hinders. We got this nothing hinders, and so in October 2015, the process could be opened. And I must say, in between, we had a changing of bishops. At the moment, in 2015, there was no bishop in our diocese, but an apostolic, how do you call it? The word just someone who represented the bishop, an apostolic administrator, and he did very good work. He was very engaged and very kind. After all these preparative activities, the inaugurating session took place on the 14th of October 2015 in the Episcopal offices at Limburg. At the end, you will see some photos, but first some sentences. And now, our team, I mentioned, okay, we can show it also to here. I will show it. Here you have, on the right side, the apostolic administrator. Next to him, the promoter of justice, this very highly expert Jewish priest. Here you have the administrator with the episcopal delegate. This is a Jesuit priest, a lawyer, and he is in this team the representative of the bishop. Here you have these three important persons together, and each of them, you will see it later also, they have to sign their oaths. Each of them has to give an oath that they will do all following the laws and follow their conscience. So we can. Here you have a part of the group. Here the first is also a Jesuit. We have many Jesuits in the group. He is one of the theologian censors. Then there is someone you know. At the end, this lady with the red hairs, this is one of the historians. She lives in the Diocese of Limburg and works at the University of Frankfurt. The next one is an assistant of the bishop or of the administrator. Then you have these three, promoter justitiae, the administrator, the delegate. Then behind the bottle there, that's a lawyer. Then the next one is a dean of the parishes around Dernbach, to which we belonged also. This is this group. Here you have another historian. He is a Dutch priest, and he is a very well-informed and very good man, because he has, I have perhaps to speak about it later, he was the final redactor of the book about the martyrs of the 20th century in the Netherlands. So he had a very high knowledge. And he is just swearing. And this is a whole group. You have the historian. Then the next lady is a notary working in the officiate in the diocese. Then you have this Dutch priest historian, then the Jesuit who is a representative of the bishop, then the notary there, then the administrator behind Father Bernd, behind Sister Arnolda, Sir Christiane, Sister Arnolda, Father Bernd, then the promoter Justitia, then there is a, what did I, there is the translator into English, then comes this Dean of Montabaur, behind the secretary of the administrator, and Sister Patricia, who represented the congregation. So you see, and then there is still another theological censor. This should have been a Dutch priest, a very Thank you. Team tries to bring all the researches, the studies of the many documents, and the written results of all this to an end, so that at least in the beginning of the coming year, we can send all the documents to Rome. There they will be studied and analyzed. How long this will take, no one can say it. If all goes well, we have to take care that a scientific report about the process and mainly about Sister Aloysia's life will be written. It will go back to Rome, and then we have to wait for the announcement of the beatification. That's it. Thank you for your patience and for your listening.
Thank you, Sister Christiane. Are there any questions? We have 2 microphones floating here.
Yes, I can do. I will just prep.
I would just like to have it clear about miracles. Usually, I think if they're canonized as a martyr, they do not need the miracle. Is Sister Aloysia, is this going as a martyr or as a saint? Do we need a miracle or not?
We don't need a miracle because her death is clearly defined as martyrdom. As I said in between, she could have chosen another way. She remained where she was. She followed her spiritual way. And she could not escape of being caught by the police, political police, and sent to the concentration camp. And there was also no possibility to evade. So she knew very clearly that this was a way to death, and that she decided for this. So she is recognized as a martyr. And then there is still a little help or support therein. This Edith Stein has already been beatified and canonized because she was a well-known person in Germany, and Pope John Paul II wanted to have 3 saints as patronesses, female saints, as patronesses for Europe in 2000. So he had already 2, Christine of Pisa from the 15th century, sorry, Brigitte of Sweden from the 17th century, and now the 3rd. For him it was perfect to get Edith Stein. She was for him also a Polish saint because she was born in Breslau, and after the war, Breslau was no more German but Polish. Thank you. And he had known also her writings before she died. He had as a young man before he was Pope. He had known them. So it was not difficult that she was beatified and canonized. But as the two, Louise and Edith Stein, went exactly the same way at the last days. Before it was different, but then you cannot say she is canonized or beatified and the other one not. For the canonization, that's different. So for the canonization, you need a miracle. But when there is a martyrdom proved, then you don't need a miracle.
Any others?
I have a question. Were any other members of the Lowenfels family killed by the Nazis?
Yes, one brother. It's not very clear why this happened. From the 10 siblings, 2 died, 8 came to the States. This brother, he was the second eldest. He was married, he had a little son, but he lived more in a western part of Bavaria or in the next little state there. Why he didn't make any efforts to leave Germany, we don't know. There is no proof, and as far as I know, also the family members don't know why. So he was caught and brought to not a concentration camp, yes, in a certain way it was a concentration camp in France. France was occupied by Germany in 1940, and then there was also a part of French people who were not so far away from the German Nazi regime, and so they founded a camp in the southern part of France, and it seems, I have never seen this camp, but it must have been a very, I say bad, that is not very interesting, but with very, very bad hygienical conditions. And in these concentration camps, families were directly divided, men, women. So there was the women, the wife went to one part, and the father and his son, a little son of 2 years, came to another part. The mother died in Gos, we don't know exactly when, but rather fast because she got infected. There was no help, there was nothing. What we are hearing nowadays very often for other countries, that there is no help, no medical support, and so it was there also. And then the father came still to another camp together with his son, still more to the southeast in France. And there something happened, what is very interesting. It shows also how difficult it is to find real precise information. It is told that the father and the son were taken out of this camp and brought to Auschwitz in a train going from the south of France to Poland. And that at one moment the train stopped, and the father, we must say, these trains were very often, how do you call it, wagons for animals and not for people. And so he could have a look through one of these openings, and he saw sisters, and then he tried to throw through this opening his little son, because he thought they would take care of him. But it's wrong. This didn't happen. Afterwards, it's not so long ago, I heard something else. I spoke 5 years ago with this son who had been saved. He lives now in America. And I asked him if he would remember what happened. he said, no, I don't know, but yes, there was an organization, SOS, and I met so many people, I couldn't understand what they were saying. No, I don't know more, remember. Then I thought, SOS? No, that was not an organization existing during the war, that had been founded after the war. And I went on looking, SOS, And then I found in the internet, OSE, this is French, Organisation pour sauver les enfants, Organization for Save Children. And then I heard an interview with someone, an old man, who told that he had been in this second camp, Rivesaltes, and that he must have been 13 years old. He was outside, and suddenly a man came to him and said, "Come with me, come." He said, No. There are, the observer, no. He said, where there is money, everything will work. I never have forgotten the sentence. And then he took the boy with him, and then he was brought first to a family, after a certain time to another family, and so it changed different times. And so I thought, that could perhaps be the same for this Ernest, the name of the boy. And then it took a long time before I wrote to this association. I could find them in France, and I got an answer very fast, and they said, yes, we will answer it, we will look if this name will be in our lists. And then I got a letter saying, yes, he has been here, but we can't give you any information. We need his permission or another certificate, then we can give information to you. Then I thought, no, I can't call this Ernest after the impressions I had 5 years ago. So I called directly in the evening, or in the afternoon, the office, and I said, thank you, I'm very grateful. I know about this because of these reasons, but I can't give you any certificate that you can give me more information. Then, and I know only that this man told me that he didn't understand what the people were saying. Then she said, oh, interesting. Here is written that he could speak French rather well. That's all what I heard. And then I thought, no, I will not follow up this. I think when you are older, and he's born in 38, so he will become 80 years old this year. And I think when a boy of 2 years has to follow up all this what happened to this boy and to this man, then I think you cannot insist. This must have been very, very difficult for him. And after the war, there was a brother of his father who was married but who had no children. So the couple took him, adopted him as son. And so he could grow up here in the States. This is one of these experiences.
The picture of the camp, were they built just to be the death camps or for anything
No,
else?
that's interesting. It has to be the construction of Westerbork started, yes, a longer time before the beginning of the war. The Dutch people thought they would build their camp to receive Jewish refugees from Germany. But then came the occupation of the Dutch country by Germany, and this was finished, but there were already some constructions. So they continued to build up the camp, but these were no more the Dutch who did it, or Dutch under German control. and so it was used as camp, a staying camp for refugees, not as concentration camp, but as camp where people who should go to concentration camps. These concentration camps were mainly in the eastern part of Germany or of Poland. The first were in Poland. Afterwards, also more in this middle of Germany, I don't know if you understand Saxonia or Sajonia. This is more in the Middle East, middle there. There were some. Then afterwards, there were a lot of concentration camps in Lithuania, Riga. That was, many people were brought there. It's really a terrible story. But this was a reason. So they came to Westerbork, those who were living in the Netherlands. And then since, I think I said it already this morning, or later in the beginning of the afternoon, since the 15th of July, every week, 3 trains left Westerbork until the beginning of 45. Mm-hmm.
You recently met with one of her nephews here in the States. I just wondered if there was any family stories that he remembered that were related to your research.
Thank you. Yes, it's right. 5 years ago, before I came here to the Netherlands in the month of, I think it was September, October, when I came here, it was not for Louise, it was for other reasons. I made with one of the historians and our archivist in the Mother House a tour through the places where Louise had lived. And then in Ingolstadt, the town where the family lived for a certain time, I had the chance to meet the director of the municipal archives, and she was very helpful, this lady, and also one of her co-workers. And she told me, oh, you know, some years ago, we have invited here the living members of the Jewish families who had lived in Ingolstadt before the war came and all ended. And several of them came, and also one niece of Louise Lowenfels. And then she gave me the address, this niece with her husband. And then I tried to find out. It was a little bit difficult, but finally, because the family had still contact with this, this husband of the niece of Louise. And so I learned and I heard that the niece had already died because this niece had been born in 1934, and her brother had only been born in 1945. The parents came to America in 1939. The daughter came with them, and then they got another child only in 1945. So I asked him now when I met him and said, why did you not come with your sister to Germany? He said, no, I couldn't, no. And then I said, oh, you know, you would be very welcome with your wife to come. You could stay with us. No, he said, it's very kind, but I can't. That's what he said. And this wife, but the contact, and that's interesting, the contact between these representatives of the archives in Ingolstadt with his nephew-in-law, they are still existing, but not with the brother. That's not. So I think for him, he must remember. I remember that the talk I had with him in 5 years ago, there he said, oh yes, we did not speak much about Louise. I only heard that my father had a sister who went to the concentration camp and that she became Catholic. I think I told it already earlier, and this was a question for him. So I think, no, I did not, or Nora was with me, Sister Nora, we did not hear more about it, but we saw that finally he was interesting in the contact, to have this contact. And it was a very friendly and a good relation there. And it's interesting that in the after, he had sent me an email a short time before I came to America and said, would it be, or would you, or could you accept also to speak a larger group of people? There are some neighbors who would be interested to hear about this Jewish nun. So I said, okay, I can imagine some neighbors, they spoke about it. I thought about perhaps 8, 9 persons. We arrived, and then he said, oh, the talk will be this afternoon at 3 o'clock. Then we went for lunch, we were sitting, talking, and this was oh, I don't remember the word, I forget it. Sister Nora, what's the name for this place where they are living in Tom's River? It's like an area which is more or less reserved. I think there it's a very fine and very nice area, but you can enter only through a gate. Yes, and so we went to a little hall in the middle of this area, or in a certain place. I can't say if it's the middle or at least in this area. And it was a very hot day, and so a lot of cars were standing before the hall. Oh, they said, it's so hot, probably here next by is a swimming pool of our area. Probably they would have preferred to go swimming. We opened the door and we saw a group of people sitting there, one next to the other, chairs being brought there because still people were arriving. It was around 50 people. And so I had thought it would be a talk like you have a talk when you are sitting in a group, but it was, they waited for a real talk. And it was very helpful to have Sister Nora with me and also Harold, he was there also. And it was very interesting. It was a very intensive but friendly meeting. There were Jewish people, there were Christian people. I would say there could have been Catholic. I have not asked, and I was not told, but Christian people. And perhaps also people who are not belonging to any religion, but it was a very interesting situation. They had a lot of questions, and one question which seemed to be very important. Why does it's the same question as here? Why did she become? Why did the process start for her, and not for others who were killed also? That was the present.
I know that was one of the things I wanted to ask too. I have heard that some, especially the Jewish people, say, you know, so many people died there. Why would you just canonize one? I mean, what made her so special beyond everybody else?
I think there are several answers to be given. First, it's not one. There are already a lot of Jewish people, but I must say who had become Christians or who were Christians, so as Louise, who changed their religion. And because this can be done only for Catholics. It's a question for the Catholic Church. And also the Protestant Church does not know this way of beatification or canonization. At least in Germany, in between, the Protestant Church speaks also much more and more often about saints. But this is not the same procedure as in the Catholic Church. But so I think this must be said. They have changed their faith. You can appreciate it or not. This is possible. And then when you look at this process, I put there some steps, then you will see that it is a very precise and detailed research. You cannot say, oh yes, she was there and she did, no, she will be beatified. No, there must be other signs, and I think what's very important is really, how to say it, the intensity of their religious life. Before they became Christians and when they became Christians. And I think it's important that she came from an Orthodox Jewish family. Mm-hmm. And therefore I read also the inscription of the tombstone of her father. What was said, he loved God, and he was a straight and righteous man. So I think she grew up very in this atmosphere, but she found her way. And when you look, I tried to show it up, that for a longer time she had contacts to the Jewish community, but also she looked for Christian contacts, so she had to find her way. I think this is it. And when you read this letter of, when you remember the letter of this Father Koik, where he said, I remember that I met her in the town when she was walking with her children. She was like a mother for these children. She was so open and so kind to them. Then I think there is a little sign that it is not only the, how to say, the religious aspect, but also the social aspect, both. Hmm?
Thank you. Sorry.
This morning you mentioned to me that there are others who are in the same process of beatification.
Yes, actually,
going on.
yes. There are, in Limburg, there is still a Palatine priest who is on the way to be beatified. Then in Trier there is one. I know the father who is working for the process, and there are others too. And then I think we have also to see, when you look into the more not religious area, in the political area, yesterday there was a memory of 20th of July, the attack against Hitler, in which run by several people, very known was the Count of, I had the name, sorry. I put it down, I have to look if I, the Count of Stauffenberg. He was a young man, Protestant, of Protestant family. He and friends of him tried to kill Hitler, so that Germany and Europe would have become free from Hitler. But it didn't succeed, so he was killed. And every year on the 20th of July, there is a commemoration of the people who were died afterward, who died because they were put to death, because what they did to make the country free. And there are also other people who are not priests, who are not Catholic, but for instance, many of, I suppose that you also, that there are many who know this Protestant theologian, Bonhoeffer. Yeah. And he is remembered, he is not beatified, because the Protestants don't know it, but he is respected so as he would have been beatified.
The question I have is, do we have any other writings by poor handmaids who were going through the religious community at the same time that have given quotes about her the same as you have from Edith Stein?
Not the same. There is a little problem. We have several quotes of sisters who had lived together with her. One that is very important, this is the Sister Apollonia. She will be 100 years old this year. She is one of the 4 novices who were sitting there in the chapel. And about, I think it's at least 6 years ago that we had Sister Arnolda and I a talk with her about Louise. And she could tell a lot of details. And they show that Louise's life was not easy. So long as it was before the occupation of the Netherlands by Hitler, as a Nazi regime, that was okay. She lived with the others, that was okay. But then it became more and more difficult. She could no more go out, she could not live when it was occupied. And there is said she was very peacefully, she was very correct in all what she was doing, she was very helpful, and she was very pious. She prayed a lot. So that is what she said. And there are some remembrances. And it was not always easy for her, because there is another letter. This is Sister Bernadette. She was of British origin. She wanted to join the novitiate in Germany. But at this moment, it was in 38, 39, Germany could not keep her. So they sent her to the Netherlands, and she joined the novitiate in the Netherlands. And she got to know Sister Aloysia, but the Sister Bernadette could not stay for a long time in the Netherlands. After the occupation through the German army, she had to go to Honora, you helped me this morning, how do you call it? Internment camp in the southern part of Germany. The Dutch sisters started to gather all these little souvenirs, if I can say as remembrances, a little bit late. And they did it not with this, how to say, or we say it in another way. When today someone tells me something, then I will ask, please, could you sign this with your name, with the date, so that I can be sure that it is correct. And that was not done. It was, I think they could not think of all this. I have the documents, but we have also, and I think it will not be rejected, that these are correct testimonies about Louise and her way of living. Mm-hmm.
There is in reference to the previous discussion, there's a category of people referred to as the righteous Gentiles of the Holocaust.
Sorry. Oh, sorry.
People referred to as the righteous Gentiles of the Holocaust. I don't think that's an official category, but it includes many people, Catholic, Jewish, or non-Jewish, and they are referred to as the righteous Gentiles of the Holocaust. And I think
those people are still being identified as, like having harbored Jews or saved people, and that doesn't apply specifically to Sister Aloysia, but it's another category of people involved in this whole horrible scenario.
Mm-hmm. I hope that I understood.
But they're good people.
There are good people, that's absolutely sure. Respecting all those Jewish people, and there are many which are also considered as good examples for their faith, even if they had not become Christians.
Yes. Then.
And we must say also there is still another aspect. I hope that I haven't not yet mentioned it. The relation between Jewish people, Jews, and Christians, this concerns Catholics and Protestants. They were not always good. Just the opposite is true very often. The Jews were considered as being the murderers of Jesus. And of those people who would not have followed God's laws, God's, what God wanted, God's wishes. And that was not good. I think this was, and when you read letters of Martin Luther, who is certainly a very intensive, faithful Christian, but his look on the Jewish people is very negative. Thank you, very negative. And so we must say Christians were not always respecting Jewish people. This is new after Vatican II. It started already earlier. It started already at the end of the Second World War, because I think many people started to say, what happened there? No, that's not correct. That's not fine. And I know from Germany that there had been also during the centuries, it has been like waves. Then there was a negative wave, then there were respected very well and considered well, and then it changed. There were so different things, but that there is a real respect for the Jews and their faith that is rather new.
Of death for her when she left. It's soul-wrenching. So for her, she did not make that decision lightly.
No.
Not at all, because of the depth of what that meant for her. I mean, I converted myself, but I converted from one Christian denomination to another. And that was difficult for me. I can only just begin to be able to imagine what that discernment, how soul-wrenching that had to be for her. And I think that we can't lose that, because that is the heroism of her decision to convert.
Thank you. I'm very grateful for what you were saying. I think that's very helpful.
And I would like to thank Elsa for her comment, and I want to still clarify what that meant, because I have not heard that expression. What did you say? The righteous Gentiles. So that would be, the way I understand it, the Jews recognizing that there were non-Jews who tried to help the Jews because it was a necessary thing to do.
Yes.
So the Gentile would be a non-Jew who helped the Jews escape, hid Jews, etc., right? Oh. Yeah. Okay, Sister Nora just said if we saw Schindler's List,
Yes.
he would be considered a righteous Gentile.
Okay, I think it's almost 4 o'clock. Sister Christiane, we're just so grateful for everything that you gave us, so much history and telling us more about Sister Aloysia. It was just wonderful, so thanks so much. Yes, you did great work.
Yes,
Great job.
I would like you too, for your listening, for all the questions and commentaries you gave, because it was very interesting also for me, and I liked that I could come here and the people who were listening, and even listening my English, which is not a perfect English, but I hope that you could follow, and it was a great joy for me, and I'm very grateful too. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'd also like to thank Sister Kathy Haas and Sister Linda Volk. They've done a remarkable job in putting together our 150th talks and all the other celebrations we're having. Next Saturday, we're having another talk. We have 2 events this month. So the same time, same place, 1 to 4, we'll have an explanation of the Triptychs, which is a 50th anniversary present that was done, commissioned in Germany. And Herr Keller, who is an archivist in Germany, will be joining us by video and also by Zoom, hopefully, to answer questions. And Dr. Buchanan from the college will be also part of the presentation as well. So if you are free, please come back next Saturday and hear some more wonderful talks.
Yes, and I would like to add something after the first part. I said already thanks to Julie Dowd, but I must say I would not have been able to give this talk this afternoon without her help. Her help concerning the pictures, but also her help concerning the English language and the text. Thanks you, and thanks also to Nora this morning. She took the time so that I could make my talk first, and she gave me good corrections in pronunciation and so on, and also in wording. Thank you.
And again, thank you for participating this afternoon. We couldn't have had it without you. So have a safe trip home, and hope to see you back for one of the other celebrations.
Very good, thank you. Yes. I don't know how to close it.